The alarm echoed through every ship in the Galactic Coalition fleet. Red lights flashed on bridges across 1,000 vessels. Something terrible was happening at Vega Station. Commander Park stood on the bridge of the flagship Eternal Horizon and watched the data scroll across her screen. Her face stayed calm, but her heart beat faster. The orbital research station above the dying star Vega 7 was falling apart. Its antimatter containment field was failing. If that field collapsed completely, the explosion would destroy everything nearby. 3 moons with 2.8 million people living on them would be gone in seconds. "How long do we have?" she asked. The ship's computer answered in its flat voice. 6 hours until complete containment failure. 6 hours, not much time to save millions of lives. The emergency council meeting started within minutes. Holographic images of leaders from every coalition species appeared around a large circular table. Park attended as the senior human representative, though humans were still newcomers to the coalition. They had joined only 89 years ago. To species that lived for thousands of years, humans were practically bobbies. Ambassador of the spoke first. He was ancient, even by his species standards, with 7 long limbs that moved like flowing water. His people were known throughout the galaxy as the greatest thinkers and planners. They had built empires through careful calculation. "We have run 47,000 simulations," said. His voice was tired. "Every single one ends in failure. The containment field cannot be repaired in time. The mathematics are clear." High Arbiter of the leaned forward. His species looked like walking stones and solid and unmoving. They trusted numbers above all else. "I agree with the assessment. Evacuation is also impossible. The transport capacity required exceeds our available resources by a factor of 12. We must accept the loss and focus on containing the damage to surrounding systems." Accept the loss. Park felt something cold settle in her stomach. They were talking about 2.8 million lives like they were discussing broken equipment. Other species nodded their agreement. The tall, thin, the small, quick. Even the proud warrior race of the who feared nothing in battle agreed that this situation was hopeless. The numbers did not lie. The station could not be saved. Park raised her hand. The room fell silent. Several alien faces showed confusion. What could a human possibly add to this discussion? Their species had barely learned to travel between stars when the coalition found them. They were clever, yes, but young, inexperienced. They did not understand how the universe worked yet. "I request permission to lead a human team to attempt repairs on the station," Park said. Her voice was steady and clear. Ambassador stared at her with his 6 eyes. "Commander Park, I do not think you understand. We have calculated every possible approach. There is no solution. Any team sent to that station will die and the station will still explode." "I understand the calculations," Park replied. "Then why would you go?" High Arbiter asked. His stone face showed something rare for his species, genuine confusion. "You are volunteering for certain death with 0 chance of success. This is not logical." Park looked around the room at all these ancient, wise species. They had technology humans could barely understand. They had knowledge gathered over millions of years. They had seen civilizations rise and fall across the galaxy, and they had already given up. "We've got this," she said simply. The translator system struggled with the phrase. It was a human expression that did not convert well into other languages. The aliens heard it as something like, "We possess this situation," or "This belongs to us now." They did not understand. "Commander Park," said slowly, "I have lived for 400 years. I have seen many species face impossible situations. Hope is admirable, but it does not change mathematics. You cannot repair that station. Your team will die for nothing." "Maybe," Park said. "But those moons have 2.8 million people on them, children, families. They are looking up at the sky right now, wondering if anyone is coming to help them. Where I come from, we do not leave people behind. even when the math says we should. Silence filled the council chamber. High Arbiter turned to his aide and spoke quietly. She knows she will fail, she knows she will die, and she still wants to go. Is this a human form of mental illness? His aide had spent more time around humans than most. No, Arbiter, I believe they call it courage. Ambassador studied Park for a long moment. He had seen countless species across his long life. Some were brilliant, some were powerful, some were ancient beyond measure, but he had never seen anything quite like the look in this human's eyes. It was not ignorance of danger. It was not blind faith. It was something else entirely, something his 47,000 simulations had not accounted for. The Council has no better options to offer, finally said. Your request is granted, Commander Park. May whatever gods your people believe in watch over you. Park nodded once. Thank you, Ambassador, but we will not need gods today. Just give us a ship and stay out of our way. She turned and walked out of the council chamber. Behind her, the most powerful beings in the known galaxy watched her go. They were already preparing memorial statements. They were already calculating how to contain the explosion's damage. They had already written off the station, the moons, and the foolish humans who were about to throw their lives away. None of them believed they would ever see Commander Park alive again. But none of them had ever truly seen what humans could do when they refused to give up. The rapid response vessel waited in the docking bay. It was a human ship, built by human hands in human shipyards. The aliens thought it looked ugly and crude compared to their elegant vessels. The humans had named it Stubborn Hope. Commander Park walked up the boarding ramp and found her team already waiting inside. They had volunteered within minutes of hearing about the mission. Not one of them had hesitated. Not one of them had asked about the survival odds. Chief Engineer sat in the corner, checking her tools one by one. She was 35 years old with short black hair and hands covered in old burn scars. Stories said she once rebuilt a ship's engine using only broken parts and tape. Other stories said she had fixed a reactor core while it was melting down, simply because someone told her it could not be done. She did not talk much. She did not need to. Dr. Shin stood by the main computer, humming an old song from Earth. He was the team's physicist, 50 years old with hair and kind eyes. His mind could calculate things that made other scientists dizzy, but his real gift was finding answers where none should exist. He saw patterns in chaos. He found order in madness. And he never ever stopped looking for solutions. Specialist was the youngest at 24. She worked with energy fields, the invisible forces that held atoms together and kept stars from exploding. Most people found this work terrifying. The smallest mistake could erase you from existence. Treated it like a game. She smiled when she worked, even in the most dangerous situations. Especially in the most dangerous situations. Sergeant O sat by the weapons locker, even though this was not a combat mission. He was 38, built like a mountain with a face that looked carved from rock. He had been a soldier once, then a rescue specialist. He had pulled people from burning buildings, sinking ships, and collapsing mines. He had never lost someone he was sent to save. He did not plan to start today. Lieutenant was already in the pilot's seat. At 28, he was known throughout the fleet as either the best pilot in the coalition or the craziest. Maybe both. He flew through asteroid fields for fun. He raced through nebulas that would tear other ships apart. When other pilots saw a gap too small to fit through, saw a challenge. Everyone ready? Park asked as she took the commander's chair. 5 voices answered as one, ready. The Stubborn Hope lifted off from the docking bay and turned toward the dying star. Behind them, the alien fleet watched through 1,000 sensors and cameras. They were recording everything. They wanted to study how the humans would fail. Perhaps there would be useful data in their deaths. Ambassador contacted them when they were halfway to the station. His holographic image appeared on the bridge, 7 limbs folded in a posture that meant respect among his people. Commander Park, he said, I wish to understand something before you die." Park almost smiled. There were nothing if not direct. "Ask your question, Ambassador." "Why do this? You gain nothing. You save no one. The mathematics prove this. Yet you go anyway. My people have studied humans for 89 years and we still do not understand this behavior. Please explain it to me." Park thought about the question for a long moment. How could she explain something that felt as natural as breathing? "Ambassador, where I come from, we have a saying. No one gets left behind. It does not matter if they are friends or strangers. It does not matter if saving them is hard or easy. If someone needs help, we help. That is all. Even when helping is impossible. Nothing is impossible. Some things are just very difficult." Was quiet for several seconds. "This is not rational thinking. You are choosing certain death to chase an outcome that cannot happen. My people would call this insanity." "Your people ran 47,000 simulations," Park said. "But simulations can only calculate what has happened before. They cannot predict what has never been tried. Maybe the universe has not seen what humans can do when we truly refuse to give up." The alien ambassador had no response to this. He simply watched as the small, ugly human ship flew toward the burning station. They reached Vega Station with 5.5 hours left on the clock. Up close, it looked even worse than the data suggested. Entire sections were dark. Fires burned in places fires should not burn. The containment field flickered like a dying heartbeat, barely holding back the antimatter that wanted to consume everything. "Radiation levels are 3 times higher than projected," Dr. Shin reported. "And I am detecting unusual energy patterns in the core. This is worse than we thought." "The containment field will fail in 4 hours, not 6, added. "Someone made a calculation error." Laughed. It was not a happy sound. "Good. I always work better with a deadline." Lieutenant brought the ship in through debris that would have destroyed any automated pilot. He twisted and turned through spaces that seemed too small, moving by instinct rather than calculation. The aliens watching from afar could not believe their sensors. No pilot could fly like this. It was not possible. But did not know it was impossible, so he did it anyway. "We are docked," announced. "Welcome to Vega Station. Please watch your step. Everything is on fire." Commander Park stood and looked at her team. These 5 ordinary humans were about to attempt something that 47,000 simulations said could not be done. The greatest minds in the galaxy had declared this mission hopeless. She smiled. "Let us get to work." The flagship ran calculations every 30 seconds. Its computers were the most advanced in the coalition, capable of processing more data than most species could imagine. Every 30 seconds, they measured the containment field's decay. Every 30 seconds, they confirmed what everyone already knew. The station would explode, the humans would die, the mathematics were certain. High Arbiter watched the data streams with growing confusion. Something strange was happening. The numbers were not behaving correctly. "Explain this," he demanded, pointing at his screen. His science officer leaned forward, stone face showing rare emotion. "The decay rate is slowing, Arbiter, by 0.3%, then 0.7%, now 1.2%. That is impossible. Nothing they could do should affect the decay rate at all." "I know, Arbiter, but the numbers do not lie." Across the station, the human team worked in ways the aliens could not understand. They did not follow standard repair procedures. They did not consult manuals or run simulations. They moved through the burning corridors like they belonged there, making decisions in moments that should have taken hours. Chief Engineer found the first critical failure in the power routing system. 3 main lines had melted. Standard repair would require replacement parts from the coalition shipyards, parts that would take 2 weeks to arrive. Looked at the melted lines for exactly 4 seconds. Then she pulled cables from a nearby wall, stripped them with her teeth, and began connecting things that were never designed to be connected. Her hands moved faster than thought. "This should not work," she muttered to herself, "but it will work because I am telling it to work." Dr. Shin discovered something the simulations had missed entirely. The antimatter chamber was vibrating at a frequency no one had predicted. The harmonic resonance was making the containment field unstable in ways that did not match any model. His died from radiation exposure. He did not stop. He pulled out a marker and began writing equations on his own arm, up past his elbow, numbers and symbols flowing across his skin. He calculated the resonance pattern, found its frequency, and called on the radio. "I need you to generate a counter frequency at 47.3 megahertz. Can you do that?" "With what equipment?" "I do not know, figure it out." Any other specialist would have argued. Any other specialist would have explained why this was impossible without proper tools. Just laughed. "Give me 10 minutes. She built a frequency generator from a broken medical scanner, 2 power cells, and parts of her own radiation suit. It should not have worked, but she believed it would work, so it did. The containment field's decay slowed another 3%. On the alien ships, confusion turned to disbelief. They began running new simulations, trying to understand what the humans were doing. Their models kept breaking. Human behavior did not follow logical patterns. They could not predict what Park's team would do next because the team was not doing what any reasonable beings would do. Sergeant O found survivors while moving through the station's residential section. 12 alien researchers had been trapped when the emergency doors sealed. They had given up hope hours ago. They were waiting to die. O kicked the sealed door so hard it bent inward. Then he kicked it again, and again. The metal screamed as it twisted. The trapped aliens watched in shock as this human simply refused to accept that the door was stronger than him. On the 5th kick, the door fell. "Everyone out," O said. "Move fast, stay behind me." He led them through burning corridors filled with falling debris. Twice, sections of ceiling collapsed. Twice, O somehow knew exactly when to stop or turn. When they reached the evacuation shuttles, one of the researchers asked how he had known the ceiling would not fall on them. "I did not know," O admitted. "I just decided it would not. The ceiling can fall after we pass, not before." The researcher did not understand. But it was alive because of this strange human, so it did not argue. Specialist reached the secondary radiation chamber. This was the most dangerous part of the station. Radiation levels here were lethal. Her suit would protect her for 8 minutes. She needed at least 12 to complete the work. She went in anyway. Inside the chamber, she worked faster than she had ever worked before. Her hands adjusted delicate equipment while her skin began to burn beneath the suit. Warning alarms screamed in her helmet. Her vision started to blur. She did not stop. After 15 minutes, she stumbled out of the chamber. The back of her suit had melted. Degree burns covered her shoulders and spine. She was smiling. "Done," she said into her radio. "Field stability increased by 12%. Commander Park's voice came back immediately. "Get to medical now." "I am fine. What is next?" "Medical now. That is an order." "Commander, with respect, we have 2 hours left. I will rest when everyone on those moons is safe." On the flagship, High Arbiter turned to his aide. His stone face showed something it had never shown before, something that might have been fear. "What are they doing?" he asked. "How are they doing this?" His aide watched the sensor data flowing across the screens. Humans running into radiation. Humans kicking down doors. Humans building impossible machines from garbage. Humans refusing to die even when death was the only logical outcome. "I do not know, Arbiter," the aide said slowly. "They are not calculating failure. They simply refuse to accept it as an option." With 1 hour remaining, the main cooling system failed completely. Without cooling, the antimatter would heat up. When it heated up, the containment field would collapse. When the field collapsed, everything would end. All the progress meant nothing. The mission was over. Or it should have been. Commander Park gathered her team in the main corridor. They were exhausted, burned, bleeding, but every single one of them was still standing, still ready. "New plan," Park said. "I have a stupid idea." Smiled through her cracked lips. "Those are my favorite kind." Commander Park explained her plan. When she finished, no one spoke for a long moment. Lieutenant broke the silence first. "You want me to fly our ship into the antimatter chamber?" "Yes." "And use the ship's shield to hold the containment field stable?" "Yes." "While goes outside the ship to manually reconnect the backup cooling systems?" "Yes." Nodded slowly. "How long would need?" 90 seconds, answered. "Maybe less if I am very lucky." Dr. Shin had been doing calculations in his head. The numbers on his arm had smeared with sweat and blood, so he was working from memory now. The odds of success are approximately 3.7%. The odds of survival for the ship and crew are somewhat lower. Somewhat lower meaning what exactly? Sergeant O asked. Meaning I stopped calculating because the number was too depressing. Park looked at each member of her team. They were all injured. They were all exhausted. They had already done more than anyone thought possible. She would not blame them if they refused this final, insane plan. "I am not ordering anyone to do this," she said quietly. "This is volunteer only. If you want to stay behind, I understand." Laughed. "Commander, I have been waiting my whole life to fix something this broken. I would not miss this for anything." "I can make that flight," said. His voice held absolute certainty. "The gaps will be tight, but I have flown through." Stepped forward despite the burns covering her back. "You need someone to manage the shield frequencies. That is my job." "Someone should stay on the station to coordinate the cooling system restart," Shin added. "I will do that from here." O cracked his knuckles. "And someone needs to make sure the evacuation shuttles launch on time. I will handle that." Park felt something warm spread through her chest. These people, these wonderful, stubborn, impossible people. They were going to die for strangers they had never met, and not one of them had hesitated for even a second. "Then let us do this," she said. The stubborn hope undocked from the station and turned toward the antimatter chamber. Through the viewports, they could see the containment field flickering like a candle in a storm. Energy crackled and sparked. Deadly radiation poured out in waves. On every ship in the Coalition fleet, sensors focused on the small human vessel. Hundreds of species watched. Thousands of crew members held their breath. No one believed what they were about to see. "All stations ready?" Park asked. "Shields at maximum," reported from her station. Her hands were shaking from pain and exhaustion, but her voice was steady. "Flight controls responsive," said, "beginning approach." The ship dove into the energy storm. Immediately, everything went wrong. The containment field's collapse was creating massive power surges. Energy bolts shot out in random directions. Each one could destroy the stubborn hope instantly. There was no pattern to predict. No calculation could help here. Flew by pure instinct. He felt the ship around him like it was his own body. When energy surged on the left, he rolled right. When a power wave came from above, he dropped below it. The ship twisted and spun through gaps that measured in centimeters. How is he doing that? The communications officer whispered aboard the Eternal Horizon. Ambassador watched the sensor data in silence. He had no answer. No could fly like this. No simulation could predict these movements. The human pilot was doing something that existed beyond mathematics. The stubborn hope reached the antimatter chamber. The entrance was smaller than the ship. Energy crackled around the edges. Getting through should have been impossible. Angled the ship slightly and cut the engines at exactly the right moment. The stubborn hope slid through the gap with less than a meter to spare on each side. Metal scraped against metal. Warning alarms screamed across every system. But they were in. "Shields engaging now," called out. Her fingers danced across the controls. The ship's shields expanded outward, pushing against the failing containment field. The energy drain was enormous. Sparks flew from the console. Something in the walls started to melt. "Go," Park shouted. The airlock opened. Chief Engineer stepped out into hell. The antimatter chamber was beautiful in a terrifying way. Energy swirled around her like a living thing. The temperature inside her suit climbed immediately. Her helmet display showed warnings she ignored completely. All that mattered was the cooling system junction 20 meters away. She moved hand over hand along the ship's hull. Her gloves began to smoke. Through her radio, she could hear the ship groaning as its shields struggled to hold. 60 seconds, Park's voice said in her ear. Reached the junction. The connections had melted together into a solid mass of metal. Standard tools would not work. She needed to separate them by hand. She grabbed the melted metal and pulled. Pain shot through her arms. The metal was hot enough to burn through her gloves. She kept pulling. 40 seconds. The first connection came free. She shoved a new cable into place and moved to the second. 30 seconds. Her gloves had burned away completely. Her bare hands pressed against superheated metal. She screamed but did not stop. The second connection came free. 20 seconds. The ship shuddered. One of the shield generators exploded. Rerouted power instantly, but the coverage dropped. Energy began leaking through. 10 seconds, we have to go. One more connection, just one more. Hands were ruined. She could not feel them anymore. She grabbed the final cable and pulled with everything she had left. It came free. She jammed the new connection into place and activated the system with her elbow because her fingers no longer worked. It is done, go. Did not need to be told twice. He punched the engines and sent the stubborn Hope screaming out of the chamber. Behind them, the backup cooling system activated. Cold flooded into the antimatter chamber. The containment field stabilized. The station stopped dying. On the moons below, 2.8 million people looked up at the sky. They did not know how close they had come to death. They did not know that 6 humans had just done the impossible. The stubborn Hope limped out of the station, barely holding together. Half its systems were dead. Its hull was cracked and scorched, but it was still flying. And everyone on board was still alive. The stubborn Hope docked with the Eternal Horizon 17 minutes after the containment field stabilized. Medical teams rushed to meet them, both human and alien. What they found shocked everyone. Lieutenant walked off the ship under his own power, though his hands would not stop shaking. Specialist had to be carried. The burns on her back had spread, and she had lost consciousness just after they escaped the chamber. Sergeant O arrived on a shuttle from the station, surrounded by grateful alien researchers who refused to leave his side. Dr. Shin came last, covered in ash and dried blood, his arms still marked with equations that had saved millions of lives. He was humming softly to himself, the same old Earth song he always hummed when he worked. Commander Park was placed on a stretcher despite her protests. Radiation exposure, burns, exhaustion. The medical scanners showed damage that would have killed most species. She smiled through it all. But it was Chief Engineer who drew the most attention. Her hands were wrapped in emergency bandages that were already soaking through with blood. She had held melting metal with her bare skin. She had completed the repair anyway. The doctors were not sure if she would ever use her hands properly again. "Worth it," she said when they told her. "Every scar is worth it." Ambassador arrived at the medical bay within the hour. For a long time, he simply stood there, looking at the 6 humans who had done what 47,000 simulations said could not be done. His 7 limbs hung loose at his sides. His 6 eyes blinked slowly. Finally, he approached Commander Park's bed. "We calculated this as impossible," he said. His voice sounded different than before, smaller, less certain. "Every model, every simulation, every logical analysis, they all said you would fail. How did you succeed?" Park looked up at him with tired eyes. She was barely conscious. Every part of her body hurt, but she smiled anyway. "We did not calculate it," she said simply. "We just did it." Stood very still. In 400 years, no one had ever made him feel so confused. His people had built empires through careful thought and planning. They had conquered challenges through superior calculation. And here was this young species, barely out of their cradle world, achieving the impossible through sheer stubborn refusal to accept failure. "I do not understand," he admitted. "That is okay," Park said. "Sometimes you do not need to understand. Sometimes you just need to try." The news spread across the coalition like fire. Every species heard the story. A failing station, certain death, and 6 humans who said, "We've got this," and then proved it. High Arbiter of the made an official request the next day. He wanted human advisors assigned to all crisis response teams. His species trusted mathematics above all else. But they had learned that sometimes the numbers were not enough. Sometimes you needed beings who would look at impossible odds and simply refuse to believe them. The High Council commissioned a new field of study. They called it the human variable. Philosophers and scientists would spend decades trying to understand how hope could become a force strong enough to bend reality. They would write thousands of papers. None of them would fully explain what had happened at Vega Station. They composed songs about the rescue. They built tiny models of the stubborn hope and gave them to their children as symbols of courage. Even the proud warriors who respected only strength in battle bowed their heads when human ships passed. They had seen true bravery. They would not forget it. The rescued alien researchers gathered to discuss how they could honor the humans who had saved them. They wanted to rebuild the stubborn hope and preserve it as a monument, a symbol that would stand forever. When they asked Commander Park's opinion, she shook her head. "Take the materials," she said. "Build something new, a rescue ship, name it tomorrow." The aliens did not understand at first. Why would humans not want their victory remembered? Why refuse a monument to their impossible achievement? "Because we do not do these things for monuments," Park explained. "We do them so there will be a tomorrow for everyone. That is enough." 3 weeks later, Specialist lay in the recovery ward. Her burns were healing slowly. She would carry scars for the rest of her life, scars she wore with quiet pride. A young entered her room. It was barely 20 years old by their standards, which meant it had lived twice as long as. But it moved with the hesitation of someone much younger, someone searching for answers. "May I ask you something?" they said. Nodded. "The radiation chamber. Your suit could only protect you for 8 minutes. You needed 12. You stayed for 15. The 6 eyes blinked rapidly. "You knew you would be hurt. You knew the burns would be severe. How could you walk into that chamber knowing what would happen to you?" Thought about the question for a long moment. She remembered the heat, the pain, the warning screaming in her helmet. She remembered choosing to stay anyway. "My grandmother taught me something when I was very young," said slowly. "She said that when someone needs help, you help them. That is all. The rest is just details." They stared at her. Its species had studied philosophy for millions of years. They had developed complex theories about ethics and duty and the nature of sacrifice. And here was this human, summing up everything with words simple enough for a child to understand. When someone needs help, you help them. That is all. For the first time in its species' recorded history, the young understood what humans meant when they talked about hope. It was not a calculation. It was not a logical assessment of probable outcomes. It was a choice, a decision to believe that things could be better, and then to make them better through action. They left the medical bay different than when it entered. It would go on to become one of the greatest philosophers of its generation. It would spend its entire life trying to explain the human heart to species that lived by numbers and logic. And in every lecture, every paper, every discussion, it would return to those simple words. When someone needs help, you help them. That is all. The rest is just details. Across the galaxy, beings looked at humanity differently after Vega Station. They were still young, still inexperienced, still rough around the edges, but they had something that older, wiser species had forgotten how to feel. When the universe said something was impossible, humanity simply did not listen. And somehow, impossibly, wonderfully, stubbornly, they succeeded anyway.